Welcome to Holy Fuck.
Holy fuck. Holy fuck.
Two gals on the prowl for enlightenment, sex, and all things holy.
Holy fuck.
Each week, beauty alchemist and transformational coach and speaker, Katherine McClelland, and spiritual healer and life coach, Krista Kim, discuss navigating spiritual consciousness in a real human body. Stumbling through dating, relationships, and everyday life, all while maintaining a fucking sense of humor.
Hi, Krista.
Hi, Katherine. Hi, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome.
Krista just fixed her hair before the show, and I think she got confused because she thought we were doing a video or something.
Well, welcome, everyone, to the Holy Fuck podcast. She obviously could not wait 5 more seconds in order to tell you that story because she thought it was so funny.
Krista and I are going to have a fight now about who interrupts who more.
Because Katherine just told me before the episode started, she's like, I think I might be punchy today. And I was like, I thought punchy meant like argumentative. And I'm like, okay, I will prepare myself for that. But
punchy means goofy.
Okay.
I'm a little goofy today, but a perfectly good reason. So
yes, you do.
We just had our man, Ken Eros, on the block. He's awesome. We think it's very, very funny that the man who is doing our sound engineering for us, his last name is Eros. Don't you guys get it? Don't you think it's funny?
I don't know if he's going to want credit because
he doesn't want credit because we bastardize these things so badly. And he can't fix them.
It's like we give him shitty quality recordings and he just does the best he can with them.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
We'll just call him Mr. X from now on. He's quite a good and talented person, so he probably does not want this referral.
Yeah, exactly. So, Katherine, this is your week. You've had a big week.
I have had a big week. Although pretty much everybody has a big week. Almost every week I'm starting to notice in this lifetime.
It's true.
This one has been particularly big. I don't know I don't know if we've talked about my mom on this show up till this point.
No.
I don't think we have. But in the background of this show, kind of essentially since we started going live, since we launched is what I mean, my mother's been failing, and she died 2 days ago now, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she died 2 days ago, and it was a big journey from when she started failing until that moment. And as you can imagine, last couple days are still a big journey. The reason I said I was punchy is for some reason the way this grieving is settling in is I'm not sleeping well. I don't think that's probably too unusual, but It makes me really weird. A little awkward during the day. Sometimes my words don't come out well, and we just made up a whole new
oh God. Well, I don't even remember what you were trying to say.
I don't know what I was trying to say either, but it came out.
I think we have the first circle. Well, I think we have it on an outtake. It actually did get recorded.
But we were talking about someone was offering Krista a book about Eros, and so we were noticing that our sound engineer who was with us, name was Eros, and the book was named Eros, and something came out of my mouth about a fur circle, and it just went downhill from there. So we're only telling this to prepare you for what might happen the rest of the show today.
Well, and my sense is kind of like when we are broken down, when we are grieving, our bodies are tired, it's like spirit steps in with the humor and like the giggliness of just like lightening the energy, almost like when we can't take any more, we have to find something to laugh at, or it just gets too dark.
Yeah, it comes up and down, doesn't it? And you'll hear it in my voice going up and down. My mother is a lovely, lovely person, and she definitely she chose to gently go with the invitation of the universe to go into another realm, and it was just a lovely way to see it. And there was this gorgeous sunset right after she passed that was not like one of those spectacular ones. It was this soft. And it was like, so we live in a valley and we have mountains all around. And the sun was setting into the mountains, and it was strips of color, golds and oranges and yellows and reds. And they just sunk down past the horizon gently. It was like you were sinking into a pool of, I don't know, molten chocolate or something.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I'll try that later. But anyway, it was just a really sweet sort of the night. It brought the night down. It was almost like pulling a shade down, like the night came down rather than the sunset going up.
Completion is
It was
the word
beautiful,
I hear.
yeah. And it was just, I looked off. I was at this beautiful place in Ohio called Meditation Mount. It has a point
my favorite
that looks
place.
over the whole valley, and it's very, very quiet there. Especially because it's closed right now, and we snuck onto the property.
It's closed because of the fires that
Fires.
we had last year, and it definitely took its toll on Meditation Mount. They had some beautiful gardens and community gardens there that everyone here got to go enjoy. And now it's in the rebirth stage, I think.
It is, and it actually is quite beautiful. The parts of the rebirth stage without any planting have actually come back quite well.
Good.
And parts of it are still not. But it's closed still because it's still coming into its own. But we just tiptoed past all that and just went out to the point and got to see this gorgeous, gorgeous sunset. And this very bright light in the middle of it just kind of dropped below the horizon. It was just beautiful and very poetic and all those sweet things. So
what an amazing way to just like release that day.
it was, and we were going to go down to the beach, my friend and I was sort of tired, and I realized I didn't want to, make the trek, and just staying in the valley felt better and cocooned. And then I saw the way the sun went down behind the mountains, which it would never have done at the beach.
Right.
And it was just beautiful. So I'm glad I was here. And I feel like I sort of was able to escort her out of the valley and into the great wilds of beyondness. So so that happened.
And I just want to say that the way you have managed your life over the last couple of months with her and the amount of time that you've spent with her and given her and the way in which you are with her and the way you honor her is so beautiful to watch.
Thank you. It's interesting when we talk about our mothers and all of our stuff. And it's not that my mother and I didn't have stuff.
Of course.
We had stuff. And, as things change, as people get older, eventually it's so great to be able to step into a place with the divine feminine, essentially. For me, I just laid it all down. I'd done enough. My healing is for myself. So I did my own healing. There was nothing more to work with my mom.
Right.
And we just got to lay it down and just spend time together. And she had some memory loss. She had no confusion, but just memory loss. So she could talk to me about all sorts of subjects. She just couldn't talk to me about like where she'd been 5 seconds ago.
Right.
Or what she had for lunch. So either we would have a lot of silence or we would have deeper conversations, which were quite sweet and beautiful. And she had a lot of peace too. She had a lot of quiet. So it was very sweet. And so I think what I'm trying to say is there was a lot of being between us towards in the last, well, especially since my father passed about 6 months ago, maybe 7. Especially since he passed, there's been all this sort of being energy where we got to we didn't talk all the time, which we used to. We had a lot to say to each other, and she always was telling me how to do things and instructing me and giving me advice. Some of it, as much as I love my mother, not the best advice. We'll just pick the whole first marriage and say, thanks, Mom. Not the greatest advice, but she was doing it from a place where she meant well.
But
It's taught me a lot about not giving advice. Because she really meant well. In her framework, I was going to be hurting myself if I moved across the country and quit my job with a man who had a job, but I didn't, and we weren't engaged and all that. And it was such an interesting thing to then come under this fire. I was young enough to be sort of molded by it still, make the choice to marry, realize it was the wrong choice. The train was racing out of the station. The invitations, my mother had converted her dress for me. So a year had gone by while she was doing. I could not stop the train. And I married him. And it was not right. It was not the right marriage. And it hurt everybody in the end, right? Everybody got their feelings hurt. We were really good friends. We should have dated for a while. We would have come to California, broken up.
Yeah.
And that would have been the end. Either I would have gone home or I would have gotten a job.
So what did your mom have to say about it? What was her advice?
Her advice
That didn't go over well.
Oh, her advice was, well, I was in New York and I had a big career. And she was afraid that I was giving my career up to go to California with a man. And that he would be able to dump me when we got here. And then I would have nothing. At that point in my life, hated my job. And the idea of coming to California and getting a new one that was related but wasn't the same one would have been fantastic. And it wasn't like when you leave your career, you can't go get another job. But in her mind, in her world, it was a very women's lib kind of thing to do, like force your power, right? Don't let that man do you wrong kind of thing. And it was like, it was nothing like that. It was just like, he had a job. He said, hey, you want to come? I was like, yeah. You got a job in an apartment? And of course I was like, I'll get a job when I get there. And I just didn't fight her on it. For some reason, her intensity was big. So it's curious that story just came up because I think with mothers and daughters, it's a really important thing. My mother actually never asked me what was going on for me. She thought she saw it the way she saw. She thought she saw me giving up my career for a man who had not even asked me to. I was like this big
not
victim
even asked
story.
You to marry him or something.
And I was like, no, I'm going across with a guy who's going to let me sleep in his apartment for a while until I find a job, and then I'm never coming back because I'm going to go to California. It only took me 3 more years to get here after I got divorced. But it was painful. It was a painful experience for everyone. And I just realized between mothers and daughters, like, we don't know what the next generation is thinking. We don't know what their needs are. We don't know. She didn't know. She had never worked in a situation like I was working in. She didn't actually even know how miserable I was because I didn't want to tell her and hurt and have her worry about me. Mm-hmm. So she gave me this advice from her perspective. And that was the worst part about it was really not for me. It was from her projection, and that's not to say I don't have any energy against it. It's like, oh, I guess I was supposed to do that. It was quite an experience.
Wow, I feel like some healing just happened in this moment. Something just moved through you. I don't know what it is.
My body heat, I'm deciding whether I'm going to tell the next part of the story.
Okay.
That's happening.
That's what I'm feeling.
So I am going to tell you because we're doing it and we're doing this podcast authentically. And so what happened was that I got pregnant and I was married. And my story was that if you get pregnant when you're married, you should have the baby.
Right.
It was okay with me if my friends had been having abortions when they weren't married, and that was okay with me. But if I was married, I couldn't do that. Right. It was an extremely painful experience. And I have to say that my then husband was the most honorable human being about this that I could ever imagine. And he gave it to me as a choice without trying to influence me. He did tell me what his preference would have been, and it was not to have an abortion. His preference was for me to have the baby. But I couldn't at that moment in my life. And I know that a big part for me was that the relationship wasn't stable.
Right.
And I did not want to bring a child into the world that did not have 2 parents who were at least going to make it another year. Like the writing was on the wall that we weren't going to make it. And I don't even remember the exact date, but we did not stay together much longer. But as you could imagine, if a woman and a man are married and the woman says, I don't even want to be here enough to have your baby, the marriage is not viable.
It's a sign.
It's just not. And so and honestly, I don't know that he has really ever done the forgiveness work with me that I have done with myself. So I'm not even sure that he has ever forgiven me for that choice.
But you don't also know that. That's a story we tell ourselves.
Well, I do know that he's very distant. And a couple times he has been kind about my parents passing, but he has not been necessarily kind with me. Mm-hmm. And he did tell me that he was very, very angry with me. And there was no way to pursue it.
Right.
And so there was nothing to do. And it was I'm trying to think if I can say this in integrity, but I would like to say it was the hardest decision of my life. It was the worst decision that I've ever had to make in terms of what my body and my heart and my mind were all trying to sort out at the same time, and what was really for me and what I was doing for somebody else. And I had just gotten married for somebody else, and then was it like I was going to lock down the rest of my life for somebody else? And it was horrible. And the beauty of the experience was that I was at school. I was in the University of Santa Monica at the time, and I was able to process this spiritually. I was able to talk to this baby's soul. I was able to talk to her. I found out it was a her. I was able to talk to her about the experience and process what I was feeling. And I had Ron Holnick, who is he's the president, I believe, but he's one of the 2 teachers also, had a conversation with me about how all souls have different purposes. Wow, this is so interesting. This is
yeah, I see it.
Oh man, you guys, thank you for holding space for this. This is a big thing. Of course it would come up when my mom passes. I did tell her years later, and I, of course, in my description did not include that the sadness about having made the choice to marry him in the first place, which felt like I did it because of her, was part of the reason I was actually even able to have the abortion, because I knew that how painful that marriage was already, and I couldn't make a second choice that was dishonoring to me. I don't mean it would have been a bad choice. I just mean I could feel the dishonoring of myself. I struggled so hard with this decision that I think I went to the clinic like the last possible day of the last possible minute, really. And it was not an easy experience. And of course there were protesters outside. And it's so not black and white. Like anybody in our audience, and so many of us have had this experience of having an abortion now. And so many of us know that wow, like it is not an experience where you just go like, oh, I'm pregnant. Okay, well, let me just run over and get an abortion. Like it is heart-wrenching, soul-wrenching. I think I went.
You have to reevaluate. I'm sorry?
I just said my whole life. Reevaluating my whole life. But
Yeah.
what were you
That's what I was going to say.
Sorry.
That was the end of my
I was
sentence. Like in that
whole
moment, you have to reevaluate your whole life. It's like when you're hit with that type of decision, it's really confronting.
You know, it's interesting. I'm so grateful I was at USM because Krista and I were talking about this earlier. I'm writing a book, and the book is partly it's sort of a manual, guidelines for how to live in the kind of life that I have been lucky enough to live in, with having the great teachers that I've had, the Ron and Mary Holnick at the University of Santa Monica, who really took me in and dropped me into a context where there's no right and wrong, and where the choices that I make are choices for eternity, and they're my soul growth choices, and they're for everything is forgiven, and everything is about love. And no matter what you do, you can always be forgiven and start again the next moment. And I grew up Christian, but the context was so not this. And what I was given in that learning that year, how I was able to go through the experience and be held by them in this place of innocence, honestly. We're making a choice in a lifetime where we don't know. I have huge consequences from that choice for the rest of my life. I don't have a daughter who was born at that time in my life, right? But
you have the choice of whether you're going to look at that as a mistake or look at it as it's exactly how your life was supposed to unfold.
I do absolutely believe, because what I then did with my life was this powerful learning and giving back with my ministry of all of this loving and compassion to people that I didn't even know existed before I went to University of Santa Monica the first time.
Yeah.
And
I definitely had no idea even what the word compassionate meant.
right? We're
Honestly.
like, I think it has something to do with empathy, but I'm not really sure. I grew up in a very masculinized culture in my family, in my world. I was in an incredibly masculinized job in New York City. I worked 80 hours a week. It was just nuts. And really, my first husband and I just wanted to get out of New York. We wanted to get away from our jobs and get out of New York. And that's what we were trying to do. And we ended up married and pregnant. And it was a disaster.
Right.
And we weren't even, and the crazy part was, of course, it was one of those condom breaking things. It was like we weren't even being, even within our marriage, like
Right.
weren't even playing with the odds. We were using a condom and it broke. And I knew, that's the other thing. I knew the second that happened, we're pregnant. It was like the spirit came in of that little being. And so she and I talked our way through it together. It was so gorgeous. Was not something I could share with a lot of people. Even he didn't understand that perspective. And, but it was my body. And it goes back to that. It's my body. It's my choice. Mm-hmm. It really is, women. It really, and for men, it's so hard. And I can't imagine how crushing this experience was for him to really want this child and have me choose no.
Right. If the roles were reversed, that would be an extremely painful thing to
I can
live
feel
through.
how painful that would be. And yet he was so honorable the entire time. Like he gave me such space to work it out. We did counseling together. I did counseling alone. It was like fast counseling because we had
Right.
kind of a deadline. And
Do you feel like there's any energy of that still lingering, or maybe this is an opportunity to move into some deeper self-forgiveness?
I just had this sense of reaching out to her soul, actually. Like, wouldn't that be a sweet thing to do right now? Like,
Do it.
you know, she has passed also, right? And then my mother and my sister have also passed. So there's a lot of the passing
Ooh, chilies. Got chill bumps.
of the feminine, right? And it's just a moment where let's all just, and anybody, I don't know a woman who doesn't know a woman who's had an abortion. And even if you think you don't, you're probably wrong, because a lot of women have a lot of shame. And that's part of this podcast, is to try to just tell everybody what's true about life. Like, people have,
Everybody has stuff that
we have
happens.
stuff.
But
And
if we go back to that, there is no right or wrong. It just is what happened.
it just is what happened.
And look how she served you. Look how her soul coming into you for that small amount of time shifted your life.
Well, it definitely added the word compassion into my very big way, and really learned a lot about honoring other people. And even through my mother, learning about honoring that I would not do that to my child, would never tell my child what I thought. Not that, excuse me, I have given my kids advice, but
I don't believe it.
Yeah, I know. But not this kind of advice. Not, I have much more of a sense of letting them express to me and then follow their own hearts in this situation. So it was a huge teacher, but I think the teacher that it was more than anything was the softening teacher. So we got a dog the day we had the abortion, and he was the love of my life for a very long time. And my first husband actually let me keep the dog when we split up. And he was very attached to him also. He was I'm just going to honor him without his name as this incredibly strong, valiant, generous man that he was.
Beautiful.
And he probably still is. There was nothing wrong with that human being. Our marriage was not because he was not a good person. It was just because we were never meant to be more than friends. And except
we call
that
that
we were.
also like making self-honoring choices. So like when you married him, knowing that in your heart it really didn't feel good, you didn't honor yourself. And so then this story, this creation had to play out in that direction. Spirit couldn't allow you to remain in that marriage long term because it started from the onset. The decision was made not in your integrity, right?
Yeah, like it was not holy.
It was not holy because you were
There was no
doubting inside.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I was doing it on purpose, doubting
No.
inside. When I was standing there and I was the day was coming and all the thing and everything was happening, I remember, this thought. So if any of you have ever had this thought, you can let us know. Oh, it'll get better when we get married.
Right.
Everybody want to laugh at the same time? Oh my God, that does not happen. If you're not married and you're listening, it does not get better. It's so intense. A marriage does not get better, or your relationship does not get better because you get married.
Right. Or because you have a baby.
Or
because you buy a dog.
Or because you buy a dog.
But you know that my first marriage was, of course, because our lives are the same. It was the same scenario. Like I was walking down the aisle going, I wanted to be like the runaway bride. Like, what in the hell am I doing here? But it was one of those things. Everything was moving in the plans, and I got intense migraines for 2 months, and I'd never had migraines before, and they started coming. They were debilitating. It was like my body was saying, now are you going to call the marriage off? No? Okay, well, let me just give you another one. And people were making bets at the wedding of how long it was going to last.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. Guess who won?
Your ex-husband?
My second husband. Because last
funny.
minute some people weren't coming to the wedding, and so we had extra plates that we'd paid for, and so he was friends with a friend of mine, and so I said, hey, I have a couple extra plates. Why don't you and a friend come to the wedding? So he was at the wedding,
freaking me out.
And he sat at the table where they were all making bets, and he won. And then a year later, him and I were moving in together.
That's priceless, Krista.
It is, but it shows how we make these decisions and spirit course corrects.
Yeah.
It's like even in that, there is no mistake. I learned so much through that experience.
And the only thing that I had to work the most in my experience was forgiveness. And there was the misinterpretation that I had created the pain for someone else because of my choice, and because it wasn't his choice. And I had to keep honoring the place in me that was, this actually is my choice, and I need to make it, even if it's hard for him. And that's the place that I worked the hardest, was caring so much about the human being and also saying to myself, but this has to be mine. And we've been saying this before, when you enter into something, when you're out of alignment with spirit, it corrects. And sometimes how it corrects is bigger and louder than what you did. So it would have been hard to call off the wedding. It would have been hard. So my story is, the day I sent the invitations, I cried the entire day. That's not a good sign. So that was 1 month before the wedding. And I just shoved it down. He wasn't home, obviously, or probably would not have even cried. And I just did some work with it, but I didn't get it done. And so I pushed through what the information that was coming in from, when we say spirit, it's our own spirit within our own selves that speaks to us. It's not like there's a grand poobah in the sky who's saying, Katherine, don't marry this man. It's like your body, your soul, your mind, your heart is squeezing you, saying, what are you doing? And the one part of you that is our survival instincts, our fear instincts, is saying, I can't be embarrassed. I can't embarrass my family. I can't say, just all of it, right? You can't do all those things. So I'm just going to push through. It'll get better. It'll get better. All of us know those times when we made those decisions, when we knew they were wrong, but it was embarrassment rather than power that that made us do the decision like we weren't in our power. And so not being in my power from the beginning just kept snowballing into going all the way through with the marriage. Again, I need, from the bottom of my heart, this is a beautiful human being. Nothing wrong with him. It was that we were not aligned. Eventually, this idea of it came back around, but it came around with a little more energy the second time. Are you going to give up your life again?
Right.
And that time, and I didn't tell my parents this that time because it just would have been too devastating at that point in my life. And they were in grandparent mode. And so all sorts of things would have been very, very hard about that. I'm not even sure. I know eventually they would have forgiven me, but I'm
Right.
not entirely sure. And from their generation, I'm not entirely sure. I do understand how hard that would have been.
I feel this big sense of complete, like this full circle, fur circle
Wow.
happening right now.
First circle.
It's like with your mom passing, and then the memory of the baby, and the memory of your first husband. Something energetically feels like it's reconfiguring in you right now, and it would be beautiful to demonstrate the art of self-forgiveness right now. The practice that you and I both do every day, every minute, every hour of our lives. When stories like this come up, they're being brought to the surface for a reason. It's not an accident that all this stuff bubbled up in you right now. So when these stories come forward, they're coming forward for a reason. And the reason is we have something to learn from it. We have something that remains to be healed.
Remains to be healed. That's exactly what's going on in my heart. And what I was thinking, Krista, is I've had a month where I've had a lot of heartbreak. We talked about it a little bit with the A Star is Born, and my heart was so open. And so my mother, the loss of my mother is, again, the loss. I didn't actually lose her. She died. But she did pass into another realm. And that experience is so tender that I think now, with all of the being willing to be in there, that I actually touched what I haven't been able to touch for 30 years. It's almost exactly 30 years ago, I think, give or take a month, that I had done a lot of choices around it, but and you can hear it in my conversation a little bit about my ex-husband, where I'm holding a little bit of over-responsibility about his experience. Other people don't have to be wounded by our choices, and we don't. It is not that we are wounding them with our choices.
You served him.
In some way. I mean, he was free, and that he needed to be free, and so did I. And I served us by being honest, because the truth is that anything that isn't authentic isn't real.
And isn't done from a place of love. Like I think we get confused in our brains. Like there's part of us that goes, oh, I'm loving him more if I have the baby and stay in the marriage, and I sacrifice and I sacrifice for him. That means I love him more. And it's the opposite. It's I love them more when I'm being true to myself and expressing myself, so that he can know exactly how I'm feeling, so that we don't have to clean up the mess afterward.
No, and the thing, it's a great point, Krista, because there's a psychotherapist that talks about a thing about, it's called taking someone's choice away. And it really struck me when I heard it, that when you don't tell someone the truth, you're taking their actually authentic choice away.
Absolutely.
So if I would have stayed with him and had the baby, he would have been stuck with the who I am, with that lie inside me, which would have made me a very different person than the authentic person that made the real choice for myself. Right. So once I made that choice, he could make the choice to move away from me out of his integrity. But if I had been saying to him, for instance, we all know people who, one of the partners is, yeah, I want to have kids, but 10 years go by, and then sometimes the opportunity to have kids has gone.
Right.
And the person never intended to hurt them, but they never intended to have children either.
Right.
So this is such an interesting concept, because when we're talking about authenticity and giving advice and really listening to people and having people open to their truth and really share, that's the only way that life works. So I'm feeling like Krista was actually offering me to do a little self-forgiveness. And for the most part, it feels like it's laid down in many ways, but I think it wouldn't be bad to do a little bit around having made this choice and that it hurt someone.
Yeah, because as you were talking, I'm like, oh, in my head, my dialogue is, I've asked her twice now to consider self-forgiveness, and she skirted right past it. And so I was just about to call you out on that, like, hey, so I've said this twice, and I see this resistance, which is another key that there's something there, but the ego's clamping down, like, nope, we're not going to go into that. So when we feel resistance to doing something, it's checking in and saying why. And so I love that you came to that all on your own. So beautiful.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah. So what we're saying is there's an opportunity to heal something here, which makes us more authentic and more free because there's nothing in the way. And so what's in the way right now, somewhere inside me, I have a self-judgment about something that I chose hurting, maybe even the baby, and also my ex-husband. So it would look like I forgive myself for the misunderstanding and the misbelief that what I do hurts other people.
The truth is.
And the truth is, what's the truth? The truth is that each of us are wholly responsible as ourselves, and it's all love. That there is no such thing as hurting each other from this place, from a place of loving. Knowing what's right, yeah, that's what it is. It's like knowing what's right for me is good enough. And that's the kind of choosing. Yeah, so I forgive myself for the misinterpretation and the misunderstanding that my right to choose is, I can't even find the words. It's so funny. You have some words you could farm out everything.
Well, I didn't know if it was your right to choose, like you were holding it above somebody else's right to choose. So
No, it's more like that I have a right to choose. That as a woman, I actually have a right to choose. And that even if someone else might use it as a place to hurt themselves with, that's not what's actually happening. So the truth is that my choices can't hurt anyone. And this is going out on a limb for some people because I know this is a very hot subject in our culture. I'm just trying to see if there's any place that I'm holding. There is some self-forgiveness around just culturally. You know what? It's like shame.
yeah,
I feel some
forgive
shame.
myself for the misbelief that I need to feel shame over my decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel it. And, I forgive myself for the misbelief that I have something to be shamed about, something to be shameful of.
Which means you're still, in a way, saying that what you did was wrong.
Absolutely.
So whenever you're feeling shame, there's still judgment within yourself. So it can be like, I forgive myself for the misbelief that the decision I made was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I forgive myself for the misbelief that my path with this child wasn't perfect.
The truth is
the path with this child, this child, I even call her, this being, this soul that I was having this experience with was teaching me such a deep lesson about my value and my choices about my body and my life, so that I can speak from this powerful place today in the world where I'm not agreed with in many, many places and still not feel shame. Like I could feel that lifting right now. It's just,
So look what that soul coming in for that small amount of time literally helped you find your voice.
Yeah.
And you're sharing it right now, and think of how many people are going to hear this story, and it's going to allow for their shame to dissipate. So that soul not only served you, but all of these other people who hear the story.
Such a thing about the spiritual life, as you start to live it, you're never given a gift that doesn't give from what you're given. Right. I don't know if I said that well, but the gift that I was given through the learning and the power that I was able to receive from making a choice for myself that was really self-honoring now gives me such a lot of power to give the same kind of loving back into the world, back into compassion and empathy and kindness and loving.
Which you embody. I said that to you yesterday, just the way in which you held for your mom and the way you are with me when I'm going through my challenges. You just have this beautiful way of sitting with somebody and going into a deep place of compassion. And it allowed, for me, my experience of you is that it just allows me to go into these places that I don't always feel safe going into, or the places that I resist going into, because I know once I start tugging at the root, it's going to come out and then I'm going to crumble. So I love that you sit with me and help guide me through tugging on the root and assuring me that it's okay.
Thank you, Krista. That was lovely. And I noticed a few minutes ago you were tugging on my roots.
Root tugger.
Root tuggers. Something about the furry circle or fur circle or something like that. I'm not sure what it is. So I just want to bring this back to my mom because I want to bring it back to an honoring of her in the evolution of women's consciousness in our culture. And all the things that my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and then she went back to work, and then she did all these things in a daycare center so other women could go back to work. Like, she just was really, really committed to that and empowering. And so for her to say to me, don't throw your life away, was so important to her. And so I just want to honor the powerful woman. And there's just so many beautiful, wonderful, softly learned things in our experience of each other finally after so many years. And
I'm so happy you had all the years of healing,
me too.
So that when this time does come, when she dies, like what you're saying, it was just, you had no more material with her. We all wish for that with our parents.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I just realized is because I didn't have a lot of stuff with her leaving could be on her own terms, and it didn't have to devastate me. Right. I'm not saying I'm not sad. I'm certainly sad.
For sure.
And yet I've lived with the reality of what her life has been like since her health was going down. It hasn't been fun for her.
Yeah.
And she said to us, I'm ready to let go. She was the fastest letter goer. It was like a birth. It was so fast. Not that all births are fast, but it was in a time frame of almost 24 hours, which is much more a birthing time frame than sometimes a deathing. And she just said out loud after she had some sort of event, we couldn't sort out what happened, I'm ready to let go. Beautiful. And she really was gone very soon, and it was just sweet and lovely. And I could release that, let her go to her own experience and not be tugging on her and not be holding on her and not needing it to be my experience. Just, you didn't do this any way you want, Mom.
And that's why the sunset on Meditation Mount could just sink down into the chocolate molten lava earth, because it was complete.
It was absolutely complete. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right?
Yeah.
And the words that I had said to Krista in the hallway as we were coming in was the French phrase of c'est la vie, c'est la guerre, c'est la mort, which is, this is life, this is war, this is death. Something very honest about that statement. I just leave you with this powerful sense of how much peace you can have in your life, how much loving you can bring to yourself with your own self-forgiveness, how much kindness and compassion you can have, and how much space you can give to yourself in your life. Even if you're single, even if you feel like there must be Mr. Right out there for me somewhere, start with you. Give it all to you and open your heart the deepest way you can. And those other people that are meant to be with you on this path will not be able to stay away too much longer.
Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you
inspire
so
me.
much, Krista.
You really do.
Yeah,
I love
you so much. And thank you to all our listeners for taking a big, deep breath and taking the subject on with us today.
Yeah.
And I could feel the energy of loving saying, yes, go into this topic and don't go around it. So I love you.
Spread the love.
Spread the love. Spread the forgiveness. Spread compassion.
All right.
I love you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you want the opportunity to see the gals of Holy Fuck in person? If so, go to holyfuckpodcast.com and join our mailing list so you can find out when and where these goddesses will be transforming lives next. And yes, I know, I'm talking about myself in third person. Open your browser, type in holyfuckpodcast.com, click on mailing list, and give us your most trusty email, not that bogus one you give to Walmart. So sign up now, not tomorrow, now. Thank you.
All right. You have to fix your hair before we get started.
That was actually a scalp massage that I was giving to myself. You think this is making my hair look better? Maybe.
No, I just thought it was funny that you were like doing something with your hair before we got started.
Can anybody see me right now? Okay.
Oh, this is going to be interesting. Go.